Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Legally Vegas. I'm your host, Jacqueline Bretell, the CEO and partner of Bighorn Law. This podcast is sponsored by my firm, Bighorn Law. I'm so grateful that they're continuing to put up with us with this podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our very special guest today, Mitzie Krampert. Now, in addition to Mitzie being the director of litigation at our firm, Bighorn Law, more importantly, Mitzie has this incredible history as a legit Vegas showgirl. Mitzie is a retired showgirl and also was previously a rockette, no big deal. And I'm just blown away by that. And for those of you that are watching at home, this is Mitzie on the cover of the Today in Las Vegas in her full showgirl outfit or costume.
Yes, that was our finale. It used to be when you got into a cab, there were these little inserts, and all of the Today magazine was a free magazine that you got. So when you were a tourist coming into town, riding in the cab, you pulled out this magazine. What show should I go to? And I got to be on the cover one time.
Yeah. So now I thought today would be such a great opportunity to have Mitzie on the podcast to talk about what it means to be a showgirl in Vegas and your history as a showgirl. I thought that our listeners would really love those stories. But also, this comes on the heels of Taylor Swift, of course, being sued by Marin Flagg, known professionally as Marin Wade, and her brand Confessions of a Showgirl. And they have sued Taylor Swift for copyright infringement over Taylor's use of the life of a showgirl. And so, Mitzie, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So before we jump into all of the stuff about Taylor Swift and all of the lawsuit that's been filed against her, why don't you tell us, I know a lot of your background as far as your history as a showgirl, but tell us how you got started. You're from Nevada, grew up here. Tell us how you got into this.
How I got into this? Actually, I'm from a little town called Quincy, California, which was just over the border from Reno. I grew up in a town of 5,000 people, and my mom was like, hey, my sister and I were both really into dancing, so we started taking class in Reno at a studio called Nevada Festival Ballet. Just so happened that most of my teachers were showgirls in a show there called Hello, Hollywood, Hello, which was a Don Arden production. Don Arden also did Jubilee here in Las Vegas. All my teachers were these beautiful 5'10", 5'11" showgirls. Then after I graduated from high school, went to college at UNR. After my first year, I wanted to make a little bit of money. I called a show that was currently at the old MGM, which is now the Grand Sierra Resort, and it was called Spellbound. Wanted to know if they needed people for the holidays, and they said, we're actually having an audition, come on in. I auditioned and got the show, and so Spellbound at the former MGM was my very first showgirl show.
That's amazing.
At the age of 18.
That's amazing. And so how many years overall were you doing that type of work, performing?
From 18 till 31.
Okay. And so tell us, now, that show, was it up north in the Reno area?
In Reno,
okay.
yes.
When did you first then come to Vegas to do your first production in Vegas?
I first came to Vegas. I was graduating from UNR and wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do yet. So I flew down. I auditioned for Jubilee and didn't get the part I wanted, which was a blessing in disguise. Then I went on to perform on a cruise ship for a year. Then I went to New York City and did Radio City Rockettes. And then in 1997, I came back out here while Jubilee was still going. A couple of girlfriends of mine were in the show, and they said, hey, they're having a private audition. I think one of the singers had gotten pregnant mid-season. They usually would do a cast turnover every 6 months.
Okay.
And they said they're doing a private audition for a singer call. Would you be interested? I said, sure. My husband and I had flown out. We were staying in a budget suites on Boulder Highway.
Oh, no. Which, if you're not in Vegas, is not the best part of town.
Not the best place. I auditioned, and they offered me the part that night. I did go into rehearsals the next day and learn the singer track fairly quickly, because the singer track is not as much dancing, obviously, as a dancer. And so they ended up doing a hybrid track for me where I was a singer, but they also gave me two showgirl numbers as well so that I wouldn't get bored. So I got to I was the only one with that track. So that was fun.
So, I moved to Las Vegas in 2011, and Jubilee was, of course, still here and still running.
Yes.
How long did Jubilee run for?
Jubilee ran for 35 years.
Wow. And I always think of that as the authentic showgirl show in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Is there anything nowadays that even compares to that in Las Vegas?
In Las Vegas, no. I mean, if you wanted to see an authentic Showgirl show, you'd have to go to the Moulin Rouge in Paris. There's a show here in town. It's called Vegas, the show, that does kind of an homage to Showgirls. But they do a great job. But if you don't have 100 Showgirls up there, it just doesn't quite compare.
Right. And so when we're talking about a Showgirl, how would you define an authentic Showgirl?
Well, Showgirls have been around for, the history of a Showgirl is over 100 years. It started in France and then you also had the Ziegfeld Follies in New York off of Broadway. But generally, if you were looking to define what a Showgirl was, minimum height of 5'9", classically trained in ballet. They had to be beautiful, statuesque, and they slowly became, instead of being in the chorus, they became the stars of the show.
Okay. And as far as costumes go, what can you tell us about what the costumes would be like, for example, on a show like Jubilee? For those of us, I'd never got to see it.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm so bummed that
There's some good YouTube videos that kind of sort of give you an impression of what it was like. Jubilee was iconic because you had Dawn Arden, who was the choreographer. You had Margaret Kelly with her bluebells, her lines of bluebells. And then you had Bob Mackie, who was a famous designer. He designed for Cher for many years, many Hollywood stars. But Bob Mackie did all of the costumes for Jubilee. And sometimes you'd be wearing costumes that were worth $10,000 a piece, if not more. These feathers were unique and irreplaceable. But to wear Bob Mackie costumes in Jubilee, any of the Showgirl costumes, you see the renderings of them today. You can go online. UNLV, actually, their archives have great, they've archived the life of a Showgirl, and the costumes were just phenomenal. Everyone was original.
Now, would these costumes have been made custom for you? So, for example, like you join Jubilee here in Las Vegas, do you have a custom-made costume, or are you using somebody else's that's tailored to you?
That is a great question. I was thinking about that. Normally, unless you were in the original cast, the costume would not have been made specifically for you, or unless they recostumed or did a new number, it wouldn't have been made specifically for you. So you would take on someone else's costume. The only one I ever had that was actually made for me was Radio City.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And is that common for Radio City for the costumes to be made custom?
Actually, it depends on if they've done a new number or if they're reusing. I mean, costumes are extremely expensive. Yeah. As much as possible, they're going to reuse from the year before. I do remember going to my fitting for Radio City, and Pete Menefee, who worked with Bob Mackie, and he also did the costumes for Jubilee. Pete Menefee was there at my costume fitting, and I remember thinking, I put on my costume and look good to me. And Pete Menefee came over and was like, nope, taking that dart, that's too long. Like, just so everything was Mitzie's costume fit to a T. It was pretty spectacular.
That's amazing. What about shoes?
Well, I can't even say you always get brand new shoes because you don't. Sometimes you got brand new shoes. Sometimes it was, hey, there's a pile over there. Go find some heels that work. Yeah.
What about, so as far as like, let's say that you're going to join, when you were joining the cast of Jubilee, what would the rehearsals look like for that? How would you train for that?
It was interesting because Jubilee, it was such a huge show. They would only do cast changeovers every 6 months because of the cost involved. So whenever they had new dancers or new singers, they would audition, hire, rehearse, and then do a put-in of everybody on the same nights because it was extremely expensive. They would do the shows during the day. They would do their normal shows, and then after the show was over, so we're talking 1 o'clock in the morning, is when your put-in rehearsal would start. And they would start at the beginning, go all the way to the end, take several hours. So you were there until 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to do a put-in at the cost of tens of thousands of dollars because you had to have the stagehands there as well. Right. That was a big thing, that they only did a rehearsal or a dancer and singer put-in every 6 months because it was so expensive.
That's amazing. And so so as far as like, let's say that you have a show, how long would you be working on that particular day? If you would it just be one show per evening, or would it be more than one?
Most shows, when they were at their height, were 2 shows a night, 6 nights a week.
And so if you were, for example, performing with Jubilee, are you doing 2 shows a night, 6 days a week?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
That's just, you knew once you got into shows that was the work ethic. Normally there weren't swings unless someone broke their leg or was extremely ill. You don't get to call out sick. That's not a thing.
So even if you had like a cold or cramps, you're there.
If you want your job.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, how long did you perform with Jubilee?
I was only with Jubilee for 6 months. There's a little bit of a story there.
Okay. Do you want to share it with us?
Sure. In fact, it's an interesting story. I came out to Las Vegas after I had done my first Christmas with Radio City Christmas show.
Okay.
Got the spot. But there was a Radio City show here in Las Vegas at the time, which a lot of people didn't know about. It was at that Radio City had a year-round show, and it was at the Flamingo with the Rockettes. And I wanted to get into that because it was literally 2.5 times the pay of Jubilee.
Yeah.
So I was biding my time in Jubilee, did the 6 months. They'd had auditions for another put-in. They hadn't even had rehearsals yet. And Radio City called and said, we have a spot for you. Would you like to come over to the Flamingo? They could, yeah, no problem. They haven't even started rehearsals. They didn't do the put-in. There's been no cost to Jubilee at the time.
Right.
So I go to Fluff, and I said, Fluff Leco was the stage manager. I said, hey, I'd like to go over there. I know I literally had signed the contract the day before. I said, I want to get out. I'd prefer to be over there. They wouldn't let me out. This was the first time they had started this $6,000 buyout. And so I said,
does that mean that you have to pay $6,000 to get out of performing?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that was their cost of what it would take to replace me.
Okay.
And my argument was, but you haven't even done the rehearsals. You haven't even done the put in yet. It's no skin off your back to get somebody else. Like, you just had the auditions. They said no. And I said, well, I'll write you a $6,000 check. They still said no. I said,
so you were willing to pay to leave to go dance with the Rockettes?
Yes, that's what the contract said. I said, here's my $6,000. They wouldn't they weren't going to let me out. They called over to the entertainment director at the Flamingo and said, do not hire this girl. Luckily, the people at Radio City said, we want her. We want her. I guess it was a compliment that Fluff didn't want to let me go. And luckily, the entertainment director at Jubilee at the time was a former Radio City person. And so I went to him and said, look, I will write you a check today. I have the contractual right to do this and get out. You can't blackball me against going over to Radio City. And ultimately, I wrote the check and got out of the contract.
That's so wild. Especially doing like this kind of work, I can't even imagine like us paying and writing a check to get out of doing some work. I mean, that just seems crazy to me. But I guess at that point, you're an independent contractor. And so if you're in violation of that contract.
Well, the contract, maybe this was prelude to me going to law school, is that I read through the contract. It said, if you want out, pay us $6,000. And I did. And they didn't want to let me go contract somewhere else.
So your roles, I know that you mentioned previously that when you were on Jubilee, for example, that you did, you were dancing, but you were also singing. Am I right about that?
Correct.
Is it common for showgirls to do both?
Not really. No.
Okay. So how did you, have you always been a singer?
That was something that I've always sang. I played it. When I went to college, all of my scholarship was to play the clarinet. That's how I paid for my undergrad. So I sang, was a musician, and danced, and just, through different turns of events, took different, went different ways. But I could always sing, but I just kept getting hired as a dancer. And sometimes it's hard for producers to see people when they've seen you only as a dancer. They don't see you as a singer. But my line captain at Jubilee was very cool, and she just recognized that, hey, we need to give her a little bit extra to do because she's going to be bored. And so I got to do a couple extra numbers.
So your, even your work as a Rockette, would you consider that as a showgirl as well?
Not the Rockettes so much. Not a showgirl.
What do you think? Why do you say that? Like, why does it not feel like a showgirl type of performance?
I think the Rockettes do much more dancing than showgirls. Showgirls were to be showpieces of beautiful artistry and costumes. And initially there's always the famous showgirl walk, because they were supposed to be very elegant and not bounce around and just to be these beautiful statuesque portrayals of scenery and costumes. Rockettes are much more difficult dancing.
Would you say, and so I know that you mentioned like the background typically as far as like the training of a showgirl would be in ballet. Mm-hmm. Is it also in pointe, or is it just solely in ballet? And that's probably me exposing how little I know about dance.
No, pointe is a whole nother level of being a ballerina. I think with anything, my mom always said, you can do anything you want to do, but you have to take ballet class. And so you wouldn't necessarily have to know point to be a good showgirl, just that your basics were with ballet.
Okay. Now, was your mom a ballerina as well?
No.
Okay.
My mom didn't dance. The only reason my mom got into dance is because of my sister and I.
Why did she want you to do ballet?
Because if you can do ballet, you can do anything.
Okay. No, that makes sense. So I want to go back. Sorry, the clothes. Because of course I love the clothes. So the costumes that you would wear as a showgirl, I am picturing, I know that there's a headpiece, and I've seen the showgirls, for example, at a Vegas Golden Knights game. There's, those are showgirls?
To a certain extent.
Okay.
I mean, I never would want to. I just went to a Vegas Golden Knights game, and actually a former Radio City Rockhead is the director of the Viva Girls and everything there. They do a great job. I think they somewhat impersonate a showgirl, but I watched them. They did a great job. They were very entertaining, and probably they all have ballet or dance backgrounds. But to truly be a showgirl would be to be part of the big spectacular show
with hundreds of showgirls.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking of like there's the headpiece as well as just the jewels and everything in the costumes and how incredibly detailed that they are. Is there anything about that costume that you can think of back maybe when you were on Jubilee or any of these other shows that is the quintessential, like iconic element to be a true showgirl costume?
Well, it has to have feathers.
Yes.
It has to have rhinestones.
Okay.
Those would be the two things. It's interesting because most people think, oh, those headdresses, they're so heavy. How do you wear them?
Are they heavy?
And if you look at a showgirl's costume, for the most part, it is a backpack. When you really start looking at it, not to say that there aren't very heavy headdresses, but the majority of showgirl costumes are literally, it's a backpack. And everything emanates from there. And what's on their head is actually quite small. And comes out is in addition to the backpack. There are some costumes that are very heavy headdresses, but the majority of giant showgirl costumes, it's a backpack.
So you're talking about the majority of the weight is on your shoulders
yes.
then? Okay. I'm just, as an injury lawyer, I'm thinking of like all the injuries that would stem from that, but maybe our audience doesn't care about that. Sorry to interrupt this episode of Legally Vegas, but it's really important that I share with you that my brilliant law partner, Kimball Jones, has been named the 2026 Nevada Justice Association Trial Lawyer of the Year. That's right, guys. Bighorn Law is home to Nevada's Trial Lawyer of the Year. I'm so proud of my partner, Kimball. We practice in the field of personal injury. We handle everything from car accidents, slip and fall, trip and fall, medical malpractice, and most importantly, insurance bad faith cases. Please call us at 702-333-1111. If we can't help you, we're going to help you find somebody that can. Now, back to the show. Mitzie, one of my favorite movies is the movie Casino. And there's an iconic scene where Robert De Niro has some weigh-ins with showgirls. Is there any truth to that?
100%.
Really?
100%. It's not urban legend. From the very first show I did, Spellbound, we had weekly weigh-ins. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So if you are you able to share what those weigh-ins needed to be? Or was it very specific to you? Like this is what you auditioned at and you can't vary too much from this amount?
It morphed over time. The original, when I was in Spellbound, it was what did you weigh on the day that we hired you? And they gave you like a 2-pound fluctuation up or down, which is crazy because women's weight changes so much.
Absolutely.
And if you didn't make weigh-ins, you had a week to correct it. Otherwise, you'd be fined.
That's crazy. And then, I guess if your weight got too high, they could also just end your contract. Was maintaining the weight part of the contractual requirement that you had?
Yes.
Wow. And so would it be every day they would weigh you or just once a
No,
week?
once a week. I said Radio City was at least a little more PC about it and that they at least acknowledge that, 2 different people 5'9" can look good and weigh different amounts.
Yeah.
And so they did a whole body fat composition type thing. But what they would do is when you went on vacation, Radio City did more random weight checks, but you always knew that when you went on vacation that they were going to check you the day you got back.
So that would be like a good reason to not overeat in a buffet. Okay. Oh my gosh. I can't even, I've never worked in any environment like that. So it's so hard for me to wrap my head around that.
It was always interesting. I was very fortunate in that I was tall and thin all my life. But there were women that struggled with it and it was always but I just was fortunate in that regard.
Now when, you were describing the amount of work that it was when you were on the set of Jubilee, for example. And in that show, you're talking 2 shows a night, 6 days a week without fail. The one day that you had off, I mean, are you guys in rehearsals? Are you working? Or are you just resting?
Day off.
Okay. And so those shows, I mean, what time would you arrive, for example?
I'm trying to think. Usually there was like a 7 and a 9 o'clock show.
Okay.
You would get there. Usually your call was at least an hour ahead.
But you would have to be ready to go.
No,
like makeup.
No, call would be walking in the door in your flip flops and no makeup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would they do your makeup or are you responsible?
No, you're responsible for your own.
What about your hair?
Generally in a Showgirl show, your hair is going to be up because you have headpieces on or wigs, that kind of thing.
Okay. And so you're getting there, you're walking in about an hour before, you have to do your makeup, you're doing your show at 7, another show at 9. What time are you leaving for the day?
11.
Okay.
It's kind of it's a part-time job for the most part. Does
it pay like a part-time job?
When I was in Jubilee,
if you want to share.
Sure. When I was in Jubilee, so we're just going to, so 97, 98, we were making, I think, $700 a week.
Okay. Was that enough to like live off of comfortably?
A lot of, I don't want to say a lot. There were people there that had other jobs, or you would do convention work during the day. I think there were a handful of school teachers in the line. It was always interesting. Realtors, things where you could have side hustles that weren't full-time jobs.
It's always interesting to me, when I have people from out of town that come and visit, or I'm sharing with like people that I went to high school with in Tennessee. I always share with them like the realtor track in Las Vegas is so fascinating to me because a lot of realtors now are former cocktail waitresses or they were in the industry in some way and then now become realtors. So it's common, I guess, apparently also with showgirls. I think we have the most beautiful real estate agents in the entire world right here in Las Vegas. I'm not joking. Anybody at home, if you want to Google, it's true. And so, I mean, that is a rigorous schedule to do for years.
Yeah.
Okay.
You just got, it's a certain work ethic that you just knew that was like, that's what you did. You just you don't call in sick. It's just not it's not an option.
So eventually, I know you eventually go to law school. And I know you talked a little bit about that contract dispute. I mean, is that what made you decide I'm just going to go to law school and figure out how to do this for myself?
The reason I went to law school, I was doing Radio City at the time. They weren't renewing the contract. I had graduated. I had my undergraduate degree. And I just kind of on a whim was like, let me take the LSAT. And I got a decent score on it. And I'm like, well, okay, well, let's apply to law school. And I got in. And I was like, okay, I guess
I'm going to law school.
This is what I'm doing.
So do you, do you miss it?
Being a performer?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it's like any sort of professional athlete.
Yeah.
There's really nothing like it.
There's no comparison to that
comparison.
adrenaline. Do you still dance at all?
I do Spring Mountain Ranch, Super Summer Theater when there's a show that I want to be involved in. Just, kind of on the side. It's tough to go back because when you were at a certain level and then to go back, most of us are pretty judgmental of ourselves. And so we don't want to, I'm vain. I'm extremely vain. And to acknowledge that I'm not at that level that I used to be makes it difficult. So you have to find that place where you can just have fun and enjoy it.
So I know I shared with you, I didn't ever get to see Jubilee. Why did it close?
I think there just wasn't a market for it anymore, and it was very expensive. I mean, with that many performers, I think at least 75 performers at the time, 2 shows a night, you're doing the math, and when they're just not selling the seats, the show was getting old. They tried to update it a little bit, but it really needed a giant makeover, and they just didn't want to put the money into it.
You think we'll ever get another authentic Showgirl show back in Vegas?
I would hope so. Maybe someday in Mitzie's world there would be, fewer Cirque du Soleil and more Showgirl shows. But, Vegas morphs over time, and so everything changes, and change is good. I hope there's always some sort of dancing element. I think that's why we still kind of hold on to the Showgirl as being the symbol of Las Vegas. There's something about it that's iconic, and hopefully, maybe someday.
Even if you were to go to the Strip right now, there are going to be women who are dressed as showgirls in showgirl costumes, taking photos with tourists. They're the ones that they're kind of sneaky. They'll ask you for like $100 after you take a picture with them. So we usually tell people like be really careful. But there's still, I mean, people when they think of showgirl, they automatically think of Las Vegas. My understanding though, in talking to you, I guess the first like real showgirl show was actually up in Reno. Is that right?
Well, no, the first showgirl shows in the United States were the Ziegfeld Follies, I think, on Broadway.
Okay.
And then you had World War II, and then Don Arden and Margaret Kelly with the Bluebells came over. They met in France, and then they came over to Las Vegas, and that's where he had several of his iconic shows, one here in Las Vegas, one in Reno, and then he did the second one, Jubilee, here as well.
So I'm hearing that we got ours first before Reno. Is that right? All right. That's good. Okay. We'll call it. So I, when this case came up, this Marin Flag case, and I messaged you, I was like, Mitzie, will you come on the podcast with me and tell showgirl stories and we can talk about this lawsuit filed against Taylor Swift? So just like a little bit of background. I mean, when Taylor Swift announced the name of her new album, Life of a Showgirl, I know that we had a conversation, and I shared with you, I was kind of surprised that I know that you had lots to say about calling it the Life of a Showgirl, and that although Taylor Swift is this obviously fabulously talented person, this incredibly talented woman and phenomenally successful businesswoman, the idea of calling herself a showgirl is so different than what we know of in Vegas as a showgirl. And I know that you were like, your eyebrows were raised obviously when that name came out, but how did you feel about it?
I mean, it's only a compliment. I think, someone that is as spectacular as Taylor Swift is, and an amazing icon in her own right, that she would want to implement anything that had to do with showgirl is only a compliment to showgirls. I think I'd commented that in the online showgirl forums, and, there's people that former Jubilee performers, et cetera, and everyone. I believe that Taylor had used some of the costumes from Jubilee, and a lot of the people that had worn those exact costumes were like, "Oh, here's me before Taylor," and all these different things. So people that had actually been legitimate showgirls were like, to want to be a showgirl is only a compliment, but to actually call yourself a showgirl, maybe the definition is morphed a little bit, but it's nothing but good.
I mean, so just so we're clear, if Taylor's listening, I think your dance moves are fantastic. But Taylor Swift has been criticized over the years for not being the best dancer. I am a terrible dancer, so I think that Taylor's a great dancer. But I think if we're looking at the training and the physicality of it, no doubt Taylor Swift's shows are incredibly physical, but I'm talking about like the classical training. I mean, you are classically trained as a ballerina, and that's the background of showgirls. And so I think that's a little bit different. And then again, no doubt that Taylor Swift's work, I mean, I saw the Eras Tour. It's a 3-hour-long show. I can imagine just the build up to that and the training for that and the choreography. It's incredible what she was able to accomplish. But what you're describing, that's why I had so many questions about like, well, what is a typical showgirl's day, right? You're talking 2 shows a night, 6 days a week, all the training that goes into that, working with 74 other women on the set of Jubilee alone, right? Not including all of the background people and everyone who makes that show happen. It does sound like it's very different. And so I understand what you're saying as far as like the calling yourself a showgirl. Showgirl is something very, very specific. And it feels maybe a little inauthentic. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, just never know. I think she authentically can recognize the place that the American show, or that a showgirl has in American history, and wanted to be part of, wanted to have a part of that. The sincerest form of flattery is to copy somebody or to use, because of what a showgirl stand for. And Taylor, I think she's pretty tall, so I think she probably would have been, she could have been a showgirl had she been, born 50 years earlier or whatever. And it's actually very cool because it puts spotlight back on the showgirls and makes it relevant still today. So that's cool.
And I know, but like I said, before any of the Swifties come after me, I shared with you, Taylor Swift and I are very close in age to one another, and we grew up in adjacent towns. So in Tennessee, I grew up in Mount Juliet. She was in Hendersonville, Tennessee at that time. And I found her on MySpace. I joined MySpace when I was 16 years old, and I found her MySpace profile. That's how I got introduced to Taylor Swift. And even she has her song Teardrops on My Guitar, where she talks about a guy named Drew, which was her ex-boyfriend. I went to undergrad with Drew. I mean, I'm like dating myself, but
so we got six degrees of separation
absolutely.
Here. So Taylor.
And I'm a huge Swiftie. I mean, I've done lots of videos about Taylor Swift and all, I really wanted the Swifties to go after Ticketmaster, all of that. I went to the Eras Tour. I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan. Every single album that she has, I love her so much. And so, I know when you brought up you were like, what? She calls herself a showgirl. I was like, oh, you're talking about my Taylor. So I do think, she's brought a ton of attention to showgirls overall. And, in Vegas, we talk so much about showgirls, and we're so accustomed to the showgirl outfit and what that looks like and what that means. But I think in other parts of the country and probably other parts of the world, it's not as well known. And so there has been good that was brought there. This lawsuit that was filed, though, is really interesting. So, Mitzie, you were sweet enough, because I don't know how to pull things off pacer. You knew what to do. So you got a copy of the complaint. And this is a complaint that was filed, like I said, by Marin Flag. And it was filed against Taylor Swift and I presume a bunch of her entities, TAS Rights Management, LLC, UMG Recordings, Inc., Bravado International Group Merchandising Services, Inc. And this was filed in the United States District Court, Central District of California, so in LA. And the complaint is for really three things. 1, trademark infringement. 2, false designation of origin and unfair competition. And 3, California unfair competition. And they are action seeking statewide or nationwide relief. So tell us, I mean, you've read all this over. Tell us what you found.
I think in a nutshell, so Marin Flag, professionally known as Marin Wade, she's worked since, I believe she trademarked this in 2014 with her Confessions of a Showgirl. She has, from what I understand, kind of a one-woman show. She's also a professional singer and is part of other shows as well. And she's alleging that, her brand is much, much smaller than Taylor Swift's, and that Taylor Swift's brand, The Life of a Showgirl, has overtaken her. So that now there's no real distinction between the two. And that I think she'll have an interesting time proving that she's been detrimentally affected by this. I think it will only benefit her.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the first little paragraph, it says, in 2014, in the pages of Las Vegas Weekly, a working performer began writing candidly about her life inside the entertainment industry. Marin Flag, professionally known as Marin Wade, called it Confessions of a Showgirl, and the name stuck. What began as a weekly column became a live show. The show became a touring production, and over the course of a decade, Confessions of a Showgirl grew into a brand encompassing performances, writing, and digital media built by one person, city by city, and show by show. Now, since this, I mean, she talks about that she's performed in venues in New York City, in the Smith Center in Las Vegas, which is one of my favorite places. She's appeared on television under that name, earned press coverage in national publications. She has apparently a book, a podcast, video content, and you're right, it was 2015. She actually registered Confessions of a Showgirl with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. She has then continued to use that trademark since that time. Of course, we know then that Taylor Swift last year comes out with her new album, which she has named The Life of a Showgirl, which arguably, yes, is close to Confessions of a Showgirl. And now this lawsuit is long and voluminous, and I am not an expert in any way in this type of litigation. One thing, though, that you found in here that I think is really interesting is that it sounds like Taylor Swift's team or Taylor Swift tried to get the trademark for Life of a Showgirl and was unable to do so.
Yeah, according to this, they did attempt to trademark Life of a Showgirl, but that it was refused on the grounds that her designation is confusingly similar to plaintiff's established mark. That the of a showgirl was too close to Confessions of a Showgirl, and that her brand would ultimately overtake Marin Flag's Confessions of a Showgirl.
Now, it's my understanding that Taylor Swift and her team, I mean, they own a lot of trademarks. They own their IP, their intellectual property, and their marks for all of her other albums, all of her other work. And so it's curious to me that, I mean, obviously they tried to obtain the trademark for Life of a Showgirl and were unable to do so. I always think like, man, it's Taylor Swift. Like she probably has the very best IP lawyer that ever existed in all of the United States. And so I am surprised, obviously, that she wasn't able to get it, although it sounds like it was already in use. And so
it's interesting. I think it was, like you said, it was already in use, and they just were like, well, maybe we'll
just use it anyway.
We'll just use it anyway and ask for forgiveness. So I think that's what they're doing. I mean, there just seems like there's a little bit of an assumption that she can continue to use this, and maybe she just thought that this other person would never make anything of it.
Maybe she was hoping Marin was a Swiftie.
She probably is a Swiftie.
She probably is a Swiftie.
She probably is a Swiftie, yeah.
But that doesn't, I mean, I get it. It's her intellectual property. And I'm curious if it's, we said at the beginning of this part, like, I'm curious if it has drawn more people over to Confessions of a Showgirl, if Marin has seen an uptick in viewers and subscribers to her own podcast.
I mean, you would think so. Taylor Swift is so huge internationally, and here's somebody that's just trying to carve out their own niche in Confessions of a Showgirl. Everything's about social media, building your brand, and has this helped her brand possibly?
Maybe. I'm going to go subscribe to her podcast now. I kind of want to know what she's talking about. And so
I looked her up. She writes for Vegas Pride is the magazine, or Prime. Vegas Prime. That's where I looked up a couple of her articles, which I never would have before this happened.
So Marin, you have some new fans.
Yes.
Will be coming to check out your stuff now. They're seeking as far as in their prayer for relief. So this is Marin's team. They want specifically several things. They want an injunction from using the Life of a Showgirl or any other mark confusingly similar to Confessions of a Showgirl mark. So they want essentially Taylor to stop using the Life of a Showgirl, which I think is going to be really hard to do considering like the album's out. I have the record in my, like the actual vinyl already in my cabinet. I don't know how they're good. I don't know how you take that back. And then 2, they want a preliminary injunction during the pendency of this action on the same terms as the permanent injunction described above, restraining defendants from using the Life of a Showgirl or any confusingly similar designation as a trademark. 3, they want an order requiring the defendants to cease and permanently discontinue all use of the Life of a Showgirl. 4, they want an accounting of all the profits earned by defendants attributable to their use of the Life of a Showgirl. And 5, they want an award of plaintiff's actual damages sustained as a result of defendant's unlawful conduct. And that's the part that I think it's going to be hard, I think, for this plaintiff, for Marin to, I don't know if, I'm really curious what would happen in discovery in this case. I'm curious if her work has really become more popular, if she has sustained financial damage.
I think that will be difficult to prove actual damages, or has she actually benefited from the filing of this lawsuit?
Absolutely. Now she's also seeking some additional damages, as well as her own attorney's fees. And so again, I'm not an expert in this. I mean, I would love if there are any IP experts out there that want to weigh in, we would love to have you, and you can tell us more. We can do an update episode, but I'm curious, and I'm looking forward to going and checking out the Marin's podcast and all of her writing. Now, if we have anyone out there who's maybe an aspiring showgirl, what advice would you have for them? Is it ballet?
With the recent popularity, I don't know if you watched the DCC, Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders thing. I was obsessed.
I didn't watch it, but I do know what you're talking about. Was it on Netflix? Is that where it was?
It's on Netflix. I think there's 2 seasons of it. It was interesting, but what really shines through is that these women are all amazing dancers. They're not, it's not just step, touch, step, touch. I mean, these people, they're spectacular dancers, and that in today's day and age, if you want to make it as a professional dancer, you have to be really good. You have to be really, really good.
And really dedicated.
And really, very dedicated. I think that's something that people don't ever really recognize, especially like with the DCC cheerleaders where they weren't paid, they were paid just like minimal, and they finally got it to where they could make a living wage, that they've been training at this, most of them, like myself, since we were 3 and 4 years old. So by the time we're 18 years old, we've been doing this for 15 years,
Right.
and all of the training that goes into it. And that there's always this, well, I'm just grateful to be here, be grateful to be there, but also demand a living wage. There's no reason not to. But so definitely, you have to put in your stripes and to be very confident. I think when I first went to Radio City, and I remember standing outside of Radio City, and my attitude was just like, well, why wouldn't they hire me? I'm the greatest thing with tap shoes,
But isn't that kind of the attitude I think that you probably need to have? You have to have that confidence.
You have to, otherwise you're defeated before you even get in the door. I mean, you really, I know women that have auditioned 4 and 5 times. I was, I don't want to say lucky, because I put in the hard work. I got it on my first audition, but it was a 2.5 day long process. You had to go through interview training, all these different things, and then you didn't find out for 3 or 4 months whether or not you got the job. It's grueling, but it's definitely worth it. It's one of the best jobs I ever had. But if dancing is your passion or performing is your passion, and that's what you want to do, don't believe anyone that says you can't make a living at it, because you absolutely can if that's what you want to do.
Now, you've talked about this showgirl community. I mean, are you still friends with a lot of the girls or a lot of the women that you would perform alongside?
Friends. Radio City just had its 100th anniversary, so there was a big reunion there. I unfortunately didn't go, but everyone's like, "Hey, are you going?" And so a lot of the ladies that I had performed with were there, and they had all the different. They took pictures of the different decades of different Radio City performers. One of the women that I had performed with on the ship literally just retired like 2 years ago. Like, you're still there. You're still. I don't know how she did it. She did it for, I think, almost 20 years.
Wow.
Amazing. Yeah.
All on a cruise ship?
No, I had met her. I danced with her on a cruise ship, but she had been a Radio City Rockette for 20 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Insane.
So we like to always end our episodes with like the Vegas verdict. And so looking at this, I mean, what do you think is going to happen in this Marin Flag lawsuit?
Vegas verdict. Judge Krampert says she settles for a chunk of money.
Like Taylor pays?
Yeah.
I think you're probably right. I don't see Taylor walking it back anytime soon. And
you can't really walk it back.
Yeah.
She's already produced all of these things. She's going to have difficult showing that she's suffered any damages. In fact, she's probably done well from it. But to have an injunction, I think she'll end up settling.
I hope so. And I'll go on continuing to be a Swiftie.
At
the same time.
She's an amazing performer.
I know. I wore my sparkly jacket.
Sparkly
as an ode to Taylor Swift. But I am going to go and check out Marin's, just her podcast and everything that she's doing. And thank you so much for coming on here with me. And thanks for sharing just your stories about being a Vegas showgirl. I think it's incredible. And the work ethic. I have a little girl who's almost 1 year old. When do I put her in dance classes if I want her to be a showgirl?
So super fast. My story was I was born with my hips completely inverted.
Okay.
And I had to wear shoes with no left or right feet. I had a brace on my legs for the first 3 years of my life. And ultimately, my mom said, what do I do with this girl? And the doctor said, put her in ballet class, see if that fixes it. I think if you truly want your child to be really good, you start at a pretty young age. I'd say 3 or 4.
Okay.
If it's something that they like, then they continue to do it. Don't go crazy like dance mom's crazy.
Yeah.
But if it's something that they like, seek out a dance studio that wants the same things that you do for your kid.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I really want her to be in one of those ballerina recitals where you have to go for all of them just to see your 3-year-old twirl around. I want to do that. So.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming on Legally Vegas.
Awesome.
And thank you guys all for joining us, and I'll see you next time.